The first two people are Mohammed Abdallah and Yasmin Obeid. I apologize if I...
Obeid, but he will be speaking.
Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Mohammed Abdallah. I am here on behalf of the Impeachment March organizers as well as CARE San Diego, the Council for American Islamic Relations. I'm here to speak on behalf of a task group that was formed shortly after the July 2nd impeachment march that happened right here at Waterfront Park. A task group that includes several of the event's planners and other concerned citizens who have met in response to the remarks made to many of the Impeachment March San Diego planners in the days following the event. We feel that it is our duty as responsible citizens to bring our concerns about the San Diego County Sheriff Department's lack of response to the threats that were posed by the counter-protesters at our event before the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board today. I'll be sharing in a little bit just a few of the survey responses from the attendees of our event that most reflected their concerns. I'll also share our number one concern, which is the seeming lack of protection provided to the public in general by the San Diego Sheriff's Department at the impeachment march. And finally, I will respectfully request from all of you that an official item be placed on the October CLERB agenda in relation to what we briefly shared here today. A few weeks before the July 2nd event, two of us met with a county administration center representative along with Sergeant Michelle Craig of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, who were informed of our plans for the event held here on this property, including where we would be staging our event. Over the course of the morning of the event, we noted counter-protesters gathering at the northwest corner of the park and some walking through our setup area, blaring music and yelling profanities at us. Some were dressed in combat-style clothing that had pockets and vests, which looked as though they could contain dangerous items. We've been told that some carried bats underneath the American flags they wore as capes. Some wore brass knuckles as well. Some had helmets and some covered their faces with scarves. Just as our rally began at 11 a.m., a group of about 5 of them bullied their way through our peaceful attendees and pushed their way up to the front to the area where the disabled, we had a set up area for the disabled. They blared the sirens on their bullhorns and were extremely disruptive of our first few speakers, including a minister as she was blessing the event. When asked for help, one security person said they were not able to do anything, but that there was a sheriff's deputy along Harbor Drive by the fountain, and the sheriff's deputy was told what was happening, and he replied as he looked at his phone, "They have a right to protest too," and proceeded to look down back at his phone. He was told that they had infiltrated the disabled area and were frightening people, and as a result, he continued to look down at his cell phone. After that, 911 was called by more than one organizer and by others, including a direct call to Chief Shelley Zimmerman. Meanwhile, the counter-protesters became louder and continued yelling at everybody throughout our crowd, including a disabled vet in a wheelchair. After unplugging one of our speakers, the group started yelling that they were going to rush the stage. A few sheriff's deputies were about 6 feet north of the stage at that point, right next to them, and appeared to do nothing. At least 10 of our peacekeepers, organizers, and other event attendees locked arms so the counter-protesters couldn't rush the stage area, as the deputies appeared to be doing nothing to stop their escalating aggression. A deputy then asked us to move our stage, and that at that point they would keep the two groups separate. And instead of asking the counter-protesters to move, which had much fewer numbers than we did, 75 at most, we had to shut down our event and move chairs, tables, presenters, speakers, podium, and the entire group of about 1,500 who came to our event to hear the speeches and people speak, and to march as well. The hate speech and aggressive behavior from the counter-protesters continued along the march route. Responses to our survey about our event included the following concerns from the citizens of San Diego, and I quote, "I do not think the problem was with the organizers, but rather the lack of response from law enforcement. The DJT supporters were very antagonistic. San Diego Sheriff's Department did not do anything to separate us. I was disappointed that law enforcement allowed such a small group to disrupt the rally. Once the protesters moved in and got in my face, I moved up to the front, but then they were playing their noise, making disruptions. I was nervous and fearful from the start. The counter-protesters were so aggressive that I kept asking my husband to move further away from the main stage with me. This was the first march in which I worried for the safety of my 8-year-old, and I felt like I could not take my eyes off of her for a second. Law enforcement behaved disgracefully and did not do their jobs. If violence had broken out, it would have been their fault. The counter-protesters were a frightening threat. I felt obligated to protect the smaller and older people from the jerks with megaphones, The police should have been protecting us, not allowing the trumpets to take away our right to free speech and to gather. The pro-Trump group was very antagonistic. They were loud, they were obnoxious, and it made us feel unsafe. They were all looking for a fight. All of the children were frightened.
Mr. Abdallah, your time is up. Thank you very much. Next speaker is John Moore.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. My name is John Moore. I'm a resident of the city of San Diego. The sheriff's deputies and the police were calm and orderly, and they kept both groups apart, which is what they should do. I had the same experience at other demonstrations I've been to, where both sheriffs and police from San Diego City kept groups from mingling with each other. Both groups had a right to free speech, a demonstration. Neither had an exclusive right to the premises which surround this building. Neither group had a permit, but no permits were required. Verbal confrontations were no worse than you might see at an NFL game. There were confrontations. But the deputies kept all of us separate, and there were no injuries. There were no serious injuries, even minor injuries. So it was a spirited confrontation, but nothing that you shouldn't expect in a nation that is having the divisions that we have now. But it was peaceful and nobody was hurt. So I commend the sheriffs, in particular sheriff's deputies, and also the police in the city of San Diego, doing a very smooth separation of individuals, preventing any violence from happening. And in general, it was loud, but you know, it's going to be loud, and it's probably going to continue to get loud because we have some serious divisions. The other point I would like to raise is that the individuals that were holding this demonstration, this Antifa group, which I don't know much about, were saying that the president is to be impeached. Now, the president has not been impeached. There is no, he has not even been charged with anything that is impeachable. This is all a fiction. So somebody had to educate them and let them know that no, he's not going to be impeached, and he is definitely your president. So this was a message that I think the Proud Boys were trying to get across, and a lot of those individuals probably thought there really was an impeachment of the president going on, when there is no such thing. It's strictly a fantasy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Randy Smith.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Randy Smith. I'm from San Diego. I'm here today in response to a complaint against law enforcement concerning the impeachment march held here on July 2nd of this year. I was at the event and was very surprised at the complaints. Many people were there in opposition of our president. However, I was there exercising my First Amendment right in support of our president. It's called free speech. March organizers may not be aware of this. It is meant exactly how it is written, free speech. Some of the complaints I read, frankly, I'm surprised they were made by adults, really. It's not, you know, just some of the things that were said were just ridiculous. Personally, I feel the officers were very respectful to everyone's rights on both sides. They had a very difficult task and should get much more credit and respect than the march organizers are offering them. It is very disrespectful, some of the things they are accusing them of. Another thing that I witnessed was an aggressive behavior of the supporters of the march when the Trump supporters arrived. It's like they couldn't even deal with us standing next to them. That's how a lot of the aggression started. Now, there was a gentleman speaking through a megaphone, and an elderly gentleman came up and just tried to grab his megaphone out of his hand. That was the first confrontation I've seen. That was a march organizer supporter. Now, this gentleman grabbed his arm and said, "Please don't touch me." Then the guy bent down and started rifling through his stuff. I mean, that's the kind of behavior we got from that side. Now, the supporters of the march were the ones who were aggressive to a physical point, just like I explained. The point that needs to be made is this is the United States. I have a right to counter-protest and speak freely. This was a public event. It was not a private property. I had a right to be there just like the marchers did. The publicly advertised event did not state no Trump supporters. This would be discrimination, the very thing that the supporters of the march supposedly are against. So basically it sounds to me they just want to kick everybody else off that doesn't feel the way they feel. They change of opinion, they get a different opinion. They don't want him to be there.
Right.
I don't think that's right. The impeachment march organizers want to protest, complain, slander, and literally spread propaganda against our president, which is their protected right. However, I have the very same right to disagree with them whenever and however I choose. I will fight for my rights and theirs. But your rights do not trump mine, just because I disagree with you. And at the end, I would like to thank the San Diego Police Department and the San Diego Sheriff's Department for a difficult job well done. Thank you for your service, and I thank everyone for their time.
Thank you. Excuse me. These are public comments. Thank you. Amy Vandeveld?
Hi there. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I do want to give you my experience. I attended the march and the rally as part of the Impeach Trump organization. And I have to say that Mr. John Moore either is providing alternative facts or is lying like Trump when he says that the factions were kept separate, that the profanity was not as worse as you would find in an NFL game, and that the counter-protesters were peaceful. I've had tickets to Charger games since 1990, attended plenty of NFL games. I can tell you that what happened at this march was worse than anything I'd ever seen at any Chargers game, including Raiders. The factions were not kept separate. There was a gentleman at the beginning of the rally who was very loud, obnoxious, profane, and was intending to be disruptive and to prevent us from hearing our speakers. So I went over across the lawn to where the trumpettes were, and I stood there. And two officers came to me and said, "You're going to have to leave." And I said, "Why?" "Because we can't guarantee your safety," they said. And I said, "Well, if I have to leave, then you should go get the guy that's over in our group and make him leave." So I went back. They said they would. I went back. I thought were following me over. When I got to the man, I looked around. The two officers were a ways away from me, so I motioned them to come over. They did. They then went up to the man and said, "Why don't you go over to your side?" And the guy said, "No, I don't want to." And they said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, wait a second. You told me that I had to leave their space. Why doesn't he have to leave our space?" The officers then were not truthful and said, "Well, you left voluntarily." I was under the impression that if I didn't leave, I would be arrested. So that's not a voluntary action on my part. As the course of the rally proceeded, there were the group of counter-protesters then infiltrated our group. I was concerned for my safety because, as this gentleman described them, they looked like thugs. They looked like they were ready for battle. They looked like they were going to beat somebody up. They had fatigues on, the brass knuckles, masks. It was combat gear. And so I went over and I found 3 people in tan shirts. They were standing a ways away watching the counter-protesters infiltrate our group. And I went over to them and I asked, "Aren't you guys going to do something?" And the gentleman, who I can only describe as Richard Spencer-esque, alt-right, neo-Nazi, white supremacist, said, "It's free speech." And I looked at the 2 other officers and I said, "Aren't you going to do anything?" And they said, "Free speech." And after that, the counter-protesters came in. They disrupted our rally. We couldn't hear our speakers speak. There is a right to free speech, but it's not unlimited. And there is also a right to free assembly. And the counter-protesters interfered with our right to free assembly and our freedom of speech. And I think that I've lived in San Diego since 1967. I've attended many a rally, many a parade, many a protest, and I have never, ever, ever seen law enforcement officials act with such disregard for the safety of protesters. And I would like to thank the white gentleman in the back who keeps making really rude comments. I mean, it's just, you can't hear it, but
I'm actually Mexican, ma'am, thank you.
whatever.
Excuse me, we have one person speaking, and she's at the podium as well.
Thank you. I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. The next person is William Johnson.
So, my name is Will Johnson. I was one of the people who attended the impeachment march, and I did not realize what I was walking into when I walked up to this march. I figured it was just going to be a run-of-the-mill kind of march down Harbor Drive, and I saw, when I got there, I saw a lot of counter-protesters, and a lot of them were made up of this group called the Proud Boys. And the Proud Boys are a group that sort of, they take a lot of pride in their male chauvinism. That's something that they talk about themselves. And they're a group of very, a lot of them are very aggressive. And how you get into this group, part of it is you get into some fights with some of the other members, and forgetting if that's the first or second step. But then the fourth step of getting into the Proud Boys is you have to beat up 2 Antifa. Now, Antifa it's short for anti-fascists, and anti-fascists are a lot of people on the sort of radical left that
Mr. Johnson, you need to speak about the issue at hand, which is the Sheriff's Department.
Okay. My point in talking about all this is that the Proud Boys, just talking about it, it sounds like a gang, and it really kind of is a gang, the sheriffs didn't act in a way that that they would a gang that was obviously trying to mess with the group, and they were there looking for Antifa. That's part of the thing. They wanted to go and beat some people up. That's why they were there with their brass knuckles and their bats. They were looking for trouble, and the Sheriff's Department needs to respond to this kind of thing in a way that that works. And separating groups is something that that does work, and we know what happens when groups don't get separated. Like what happened at when Trump was here at the convention center. Once the speech was over, the San Diego police just allowed the Trump supporters. They said, "Oh, the free speech area is over there," and they sort of filed some of the people in to the area where the counter protesters were, and that's what started the fights. Now there needs to be a way for this San Diego Sheriff's Department to realize when things are going to start getting violent, potentially, and to act in a responsible way. And so I hope that we can work something out with the community to make this work, so these kind of things don't happen again, so that we can have peaceful protests here in San Diego like we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Terry Layton.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Terry Layton and I'm one of the march organizers. I am an activist here in town with the local Indivisible group. We've done marches, we've done plenty of protests here in San Diego. In my long tenure on the earth of 50+ years, I've done lots of marches, and I've never, ever, ever seen enforcement officials do nothing like they did. I remember standing on the stage at one point thinking, if I saw the police or something activity in the back of the march, and I thought to myself as someone was speaking and they were yelling, I said, okay, if they start shooting and I hear gunshots, where am I going to run and lay? That's not funny. It was scary. And I usually have my 11-year-old son with me. I'm sorry?
Excuse me. This is public comment at the podium. Please refrain from making comments under your breath or behind your back. Thank you.
Can someone remove the gentleman from behind me because he keeps talking over the speakers?
I'm going to politely and respectfully ask that people let the speakers speak. If you'd like to speak, you can fill out a speaker slip. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So as I was saying, it's not funny, it was scary. And I remember thinking to myself, but right before we started, we had everybody set up, it was a beautiful day, we had booths, it was peaceful. If you've seen our crowd, it's mostly women, it's elderly, it's kids, it's gay people, it's purple people, it's yellow people. It's a very diverse crowd, very mellow. So we set up, and then I kept saying to myself, you know, those guys are over there in the corner, that's fine. I've been to plenty of protests where they keep the protest doors separate for safety. And as they got closer and closer, and right before we began, the sheriff came over and told us that we had to move our march over to the left side. So we're starting and we're speaking, and finally he comes over and says, if you guys don't move and there's violence, it's your fault. He said that to one of my co-organizers. And I looked at him and I said, her fault? So we were, what do we do, what do we do? So we stopped our event, moved the march over to the left, and we're separated by that walkway in front of the fountain and the county admin building. So what is that, 15, 20 feet we're separated by now? We're trying to conduct our march. We lost half of our people because they left and were afraid. People didn't want to be there. Again, I usually have my 11-year-old son there. I'm not bringing him to any events anymore. The Proud Boys have harassed me on Facebook. I encourage you to go on Facebook and look up the Proud Boys. There's video of them at the march. They did live feeds of going, hey, let's go find some action, of them harassing our marchers. And the county sheriff did nothing. They did nothing. And they told us if there was violence, it was our fault. I agree that Donald Trump is president. I can watch the news and read the news, and I make my own choices. But we have a right to free speech, as well as the people that believe differently than we do. But we also have a right to be safe. And when we're exercising here in San Diego, our right to free speech, I think it's pretty simple that any other city can keep them separate. Why not here? And lastly, I'd just like somebody to think about the fact that if these guys weren't all white, they might have been treated differently. Thank you.
They weren't all white.
Racist.
Racist.
Yasmin, I apologize. Can you pronounce your last name for me?
Obaid.
Obaid.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, again I'm Yasmin Obaid and I'm part of the organizers for the impeachment march. Again, I just wanted to clarify that we're here as a group to bring our concerns about the San Diego County Sheriff Department's lack of response at the march. And because we know that this type of counter-protest is going to happen in the future, that's why we made sure that we come here today and present what we have to the board. We feel that the Sheriff's Department should do its due diligence and address these concerns and present a plan to ensure the safety of the public at such events. We respectfully request that an item be placed on the official agenda for the October CLERB meeting for an official presentation of related photographs, written statements, and discussion about the safety and security provided by the San Diego Sheriff's Department at rallies and marches in San Diego when under its jurisdiction. It's very necessary to have a plan in place to ensure the safety of all of the county's citizens, to protect them from those who wish to take away their right of free speech, and from those who shower peaceful protesters with hate speech and who try to incite violence while they film while they have their films that are filled of hateful and really terrible comments. And we also want you guys to really take what we're saying today and to have a place for us on the October agenda, because we have the evidence and we have the statements from many attendees from the marches, and we would love to give you that as an official document. And that is it for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Darwin Fishman.
Thanks. I wasn't planning on speaking, but given what was shared, I thought I should go ahead and say something. My name is Darwin Fishman, and I'm on the Community Review Board on Police Practices here in San Diego. I'm one of the board members. I'm also a criminologist and sociologist teaching at Point Loma Nazarene University and other schools. And I've only been in San Diego for a few years. I was really shocked. This demonstration really stood out. I was there, and if there was any, it was not clear about how ill-prepared the Sheriff's Department was. It's a simple fact the numbers changed. They started with 1 or 2 and they went up to about 20. That, and they also, you could see them scrambling to prepare. What I don't understand is, given what was out there on Facebook and the media, they should have known what was going to take place. And clearly there's a history of this in terms of things like the Trump event, how the city police, San Diego, for starters, prepared for it. And the other thing I do know, doing this work on the Community Review Board on police practices, that complaints are filed in terms of things like courtesy violations, that a lot of these officers would be dinged. Their response to the request about protection and security were met with deaf ears. It was one of the incidents I witnessed was the actual sound system being pulled. And with that, when you get to the point of having something like destruction of property, and the Sheriff's Department are literally standing there not intervening, then you know something's really fundamentally wrong. And there was also easy enough things they did, like again in the Trump event, there's police lines that can be set up. And you also have command. It was not clear who was even in charge, who was setting up the officers and aligning them to separate the groups. It's basic crowd control. It really felt like either they had not done this before, they did not have proper training for it. So I just wanted to make sure that my testimony is here and that there is some attempt to follow through on this. And I'm not sure if formal complaints have been filed, if you're going to be reviewing them, but I hope that is the case in that sense for future rallies and events, because it is true, there's going to be more of these, that the Sheriff's Department can properly prepare and do something modern like what City of San Diego does, and hopefully be able to intervene and also prevent potential violence in these settings. It was remarkable that there was not more incidents and more serious incidents that took place. And if you're unclear about the participants in terms of the Proud Boys, again, it's suggested just go to Southern Poverty Law Center and look at their write-ups.
That's correct.
And that's the source that the police use nationally all over to prepare for these events. And you can look at things like the riots in Berkeley and San Francisco, and that will show you exactly what potentially can happen here in San Diego. There's not proper training and preparation done by law enforcement here.
Thank you. Lori Saldana?
Good evening, and thank you for listening to people's testimony tonight. I'm Lori Saldana. I represented this community in the State Assembly District, 76th District, for 6 years. I work with law enforcement around the state to improve gun safety laws, to work on hate crimes, to make our communities safer. And during that time, I met with Bonnie Dumanis and members of her staff to review incidents of hate crimes and when they occur in San Diego and how her office responds to that. So it was very discouraging to me as a speaker at the event to be standing up on the tops of the stairs looking out over the crowd and see a very diverse crowd, a lot of families and children, older adults, people with disabilities, all very interested in what was going on, and suddenly see men with helmets, with face coverings, with gloves, with tactical equipment, with body cameras, start pushing their way through the crowd to the very front of where we were about to speak, and then take up bullhorns and begin to blast people right in their face with loud siren effects of the bullhorns. I was standing up there watching this, not from the perspective of someone in the crowd who was being pushed and shoved, but of somebody who was trying to speak. And instead of being given attention, the people who were waiting to hear from us were suddenly being disrupted and prevented from even hearing what we had to say. The deputies were 100 yards away. Now, I work with Captain Police Chief Shelley Zimmerman, and as a result of my work in the legislature, I had her personal cell phone. And I called her, and I told her what I was seeing, and that the sheriff's deputies were not engaging and were not protecting people, and it was my concern that there would be physical violence if we did not get a stronger response. To her credit, she contacted Sheriff Gord, and I got a phone call from Sergeant James, I'm going to mess up his last name, Golinbieski, but I couldn't hear the phone ringing in my hand because of the noise and disruption from the people who were in front of the stage with their bullhorns. he eventually did make it up to speak with me and explained that it was not their job to keep people apart. And it was not their job to stop them from making noise unless the noise went on for a certain amount of time at a certain decibel rating. And all I could think is, you were 100 yards away and you didn't see what I and many others saw, which is people swinging elbows and swinging bullhorns and potentially harming people. Weeks after this event, I encountered people who came up and knew that I was there and said, what are you going to do about this? I was there with my children, holding a young child and another one holding onto my hand, and they felt threatened by what was happening. So I'm joining with the others who have been here to ask you to please review and investigate what can be done to prevent this from happening again, to determine what can be done to train the sheriff's deputies to be proactive and make sure that people are not frightened by what they experience at these marches and rallies. It will definitely deter people from coming out and expressing their opinions and their ideas and their free speech from all organizations if they have a fear of being injured or harmed as a result of their participation. So thank you again for listening. And as others have said, we have documentation, we have a lot of information that I think would be helpful for you as you review this incident. And going forward, I really do want to make these marches safe and have the people who participate feel safe in being out there and voicing their beliefs and ideas. Thank you.
Are any of these three people here, Christopher Wyrick, Roger Ogden, or Rebecca Pearsall?
All three.
All three. Let's start with Christopher Wyrick.
Good evening, my name is Christopher Wyrick. I'm a San Diego resident, active member of the Proud Boys, a group of guys that are being mislabeled as a racist hate group with many members and friends of all nationalities, races, and creed. We're a group of like-minded individuals that are tired of the PC mentality and the attacks that are played out on law enforcement and individuals of different political views. We have seen people beaten, assaulted, and attacked. Wait, let me clarify myself. Most of these people that have been attacked have been women, children, couples, and men caught off guard by mobs of liberals that scream peace and equality while they're busy beating a man with a Trump hat. We have made a conscious decision to stand up against violence toward our way of life and defend the people that cannot defend themselves against the constant onslaught of attacks. We give those that are not afraid, or we give those that are afraid to come out and speak a chance to voice their opinion. We do not insist on violence, as most members that have families and and only want a better life for their children and those that believe in the great American experiment. We will, however, respond to attacks or violence with force and are not afraid to let people know that. We have been compelled to come together to protect each other. My family and I have personally been attacked, threatened multiple times for our beliefs, and been counter-protesting events long before I became part of the Proud Boys, and I'm so happy that there are groups like this have formed against the liberal communist agenda all over this country, and especially in a state that allows itself to hire open communists to state position and actively defies federal law. So we are apparently here to discuss Proud Boys and so-called lack of assertion by the Sheriff's Department at the so-called impeachment march that looked more like a support group. We showed up to voice our opinion, as did many others that had no association with the Proud Boys, but actually came down because they knew that we would be there to protect them from any violence toward them. Our people never threatened, pushed, or shoved anyone at this event, as many have said on the internet. So I'm here to compliment and praise the Sheriff's actions with how they handled this rally. They came up to us and explained how everything was going to happen and actually had us take our flagpoles back to our vehicles so we would not be carrying weapons. So be it. We follow the law and we have no issues with the boys in blue. We did come equipped with helmets and various items to protect ourselves from professors with bike locks, hippies throwing IEDs into crowds of people, and mob sucker punching people or cornering a woman and throwing objects at her in a blatant assault. The violence toward us has been growing since Trump was elected, and we've always come prepared for anything. Recently, we had a friend and fellow patriot stabbed 9 times and almost died because of his injuries. That's why we wear what we wear. We're not sorry we offended you or you felt threatened. That's not our problem. We have every right to be in a public area. We as a group realized soon that this impeachment protest was different in the fact that there was lack of Antifa and Black Macs, and immediately changed tactics to converse, talk, and communicate with these people, and maybe red pill a few in the process. They must have felt threatened by our questions and presence because they almost immediately burst into incantations from their pre-printed, pre-approved marching chants. and soon after the sheriffs moved the two groups apart from each other and gave us an equal side with a buffer zone in between us. What else were they supposed to do? I thought it was very commendable of the San Diego Sheriff's Department, and I'm trying to find a problem with them splitting the two groups to prevent any issues. They were being proactive, and given the violence from the left on various occasions, I have to applaud the men in blue and thank them for their dedication to keeping the public safe regardless of what side of the political aisle they're. And it was obvious to me and others that they weren't choosing sides in any way. As for the so-called aggressiveness and lack of police involvement, just in case any of you doubt my testimony, I have video from the whole day, start to finish, and plenty of other videos from individuals that they're there, YouTube and Facebook, that can point you to for the facts. If anything, we were threatened and belittled by the all-inviting liberal left. I observed threats from the individual who calls himself Tall Can and his buddy, and also physical threats of violence towards my wife from a young couple, all on video if you want to dispute it. Your idea of a threat is a microaggression and a violation of safe spaces that doesn't constitute a law being broken. Questioning your intelligence and stating facts that may offend you is not an arrestable offense. If you do not like what I have to say, leave. You want a private event, don't hold it in public and advertise it on Facebook. We will continue to counter-protest your events and make them as hard as possible for you to hold as long as you decide to promote them in my county and my state. It is our right to be there, as it is yours, and we do have different laws that we each follow. I'm going to try to cut it down here. I'll end it. I would like to also state the fact that California is third in police murder rates. We should be grateful for the men and women that put their lives on the lines every day, especially from people like you that don't have any respect towards law enforcement. Not once did I see your group thank or shake an officer's hand. I wouldn't help you either if there was a constant attack on police from the brainwashed liberal left. Again, I would like to say thank you to the officers that attended this event, how professionally they handled the situation. I personally didn't see any other option they had while still protecting each group's First Amendment right. It's a fine line. They did a great job representing the law enforcement agencies of San Diego County, as they have in many previous rallies in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Ogden.
My name's Roger Ogden, and I think the deputies did a fine job that day. I've been going to protest for about 8 years, and I've been intimidated, assaulted, threatened with a rock, being hit with a rock, the camera slapped out of my hand by leftists, and I'm here to tell you that this was not unusual what happened there. In fact, it was very tame protest. And a lot of these people are exaggerating to the point of lying. And I've got video that will prove that. I took video from start to finish also. And I went to take video. I'm not necessarily a big Trump supporter, and I'm not a Proud Boy. But I had seen all the hysteria on the internet about the Proud Boys. And I wanted to go down and learn something more about what Proud Boys are. And they're not fascist. And I didn't see any violence or threats of violence. And Mr. Muhammad here said someone walked through their crowd with a loudspeaker playing music. That was me. I was the only one playing music on a loudspeaker that day. And he said that he was shouting obscenities. I was not shouting obscenities. Either he's mistaken or he's a bald-faced liar. But I believe a lot of these people are exaggerating and they're lying. And the deputies, well, the Proud Boys marched into the crowd, and a lot of these Proud Boys are too straight to walk on the grass. They went out of their way to be on the sidewalk and made a 90-degree turn and went into the crowd. And there was some intense engagements in the crowd, but it was nothing that wasn't free speech. And I didn't hear any threats, and I didn't see any violence. But I've been abused many times at protest. And as far as I saw, they weren't. But I do believe them that they were scared, because I filmed the May Day protest of there were about 6 Proud Boys there, and that was a much more hardcore group. And I think, like Chris said, the Proud Boys are a reaction to the violence that has been practiced on Trump supporters at all of the Trump speeches. Last year at the Trump speech, they stormed the convention center trying to shut it down. They were trying to shut down Trump's speech. And they were throwing bottles. I was threatened myself with a rock. I've got that on video. And they were assaulting people. They were burning Trump gear, and the Proud Boys are a reaction to that. But when the Proud Boys got to the county administration building, I didn't know what to expect either. So I came down here, I thought there might be violence that day. And I think the liberals here, they're mostly a suburban, left-wing group that are not really hardcore. So I think they were scared. I was a little bit concerned myself. But that's not necessarily a reason for the police to deny these people their free speech. And the police separated them after about 30 minutes, and the Proud Boys obeyed every order that the police gave them. And the only ones that was ejected from the event were some leftist anarchists. It's Jesse Cannon and a couple of his friends, and the PSL, which the wiki lists as revolutionary Marxist-Leninists. They were trying to pick fights with the cowboys, with the Proud Boys. And the police asked them to leave. The Proud Boys don't back down, but they have been wantonly destroying property and attacking innocent people like some groups on the left, such as Antifa, which was represented at this event. And the impeached Trump people have no right to bar other protesters because of their opinions. People are only expressing their opinions, maybe in an intense way, maybe in a rude way, but that's no reason. They didn't have a permit to protest here, and they didn't have a permit for amplified sound. And we have the same right to be there with amplified sound as they do. And we have the same right to voice our opinions as they do. And if you look, I think it's revealing, if you look at the name of their Facebook page for this event, and the name of the event is Shut Down the Proud Boys. They want to deny the Proud Boys their freedom of speech. And the banner on that page says, "No, in the name of humanity, we will not accept a fascist America." And the Proud Boys...
Your time is up. I'm sorry, sir.
This complaint is frivolous, in my opinion. It's driven by politics, anti-police sentiment, hysteria, and Proud Boy phobia. You should dismiss it.
Rebecca, first off.
Hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm a resident of San Diego, and I'm obviously not a Proud Boy, though I will proudly admit to knowing some of them. However, I did not know any of them when I learned about the impeachment march and decided to protest it. Let me say that again. I was coming to the march, whether the Proud Boys were here or not, though their presence made me feel immeasurably safer. I am not here to support the Proud Boys now, as I believe they can stand on their own without me. I am here to speak on what I observed here on July 2nd and to thank the Sheriff's Department for allowing me the space and freedom to exercise my First Amendment right that day. Many counter-protesters gathered on the north lawn of the administration center, with the impeachment marchers gathered on the south side, before 11 a.m. During that time, several officers came over and asked us our intentions. We told them that we were there to counter-protest, but we would cooperate with their directions to the fullest degree. As we moved closer to the center of the property, the sheriffs came back over and told us that we could not have our flags on poles thicker than our thumbs because they could be used as a weapon. Every counter-protester complied with the sheriff's demands. Flags were taken back to vehicles or removed from their poles, and this is why there are photos of many of the protesters with the flag draped on their back, as so many people have complained about. As we, the protesters, started entering the crowd of this public event, the sheriffs on site got understandably nervous for the safety of all of us, pro and anti-Trump alike, and asked us to move to the north side of the entrance to the building. They told us they would be separating us from the impeachers by keeping them on the south side of the building with a walkway to the front of the doors to be used as a buffer between the two groups. As promised, we immediately complied. The group of impeachers did not. Whether they flat out refused the Sheriff's Department or simply did not hear the request is up for debate, but they did have a PA system out there, and they could have made an announcement and chose not to do so. Shortly after the Sheriff's request, the impeachers went on their march toward the south. At that time, a few known members of the group Antifa showed up, walked through the north side of the property, and made threats to the entire group of us as they walked through. Seeing a definite issue there, the sheriffs again separated us and requested that these few young men make their way to the south side, which they did. As the impeachers went on their march, we protesters marched on the opposite direction, only to meet up with them and walk with them the rest of the way back to the administration building. At that time, I asked the group marching I asked the group what marching was going to do to help get Trump impeached. A woman replied to me, quote, "It's going to get your ass beat." Since I was filming at the time, I asked the woman if that was a threat, and she turned around and replied, yes. A group of people separated us, and she went on her way. Well, when we got back to the front of the building, the sheriffs had gained more control of the concrete walkway separating the north and south lawns from the administration building, and kept each group on its designated lawn with about 5 or 6 sheriffs standing on the walkway to keep us separated. The woman who threatened me kept walking back and forth in front of our group and weaving her way through our group from behind in an unsuccessful attempt to catch me with my back turned. The last time I saw her, she was speaking with a sheriff, and then she walked off the property and did not return. I assume that they caught wind of what she was up to and asked her to leave before things took a turn for the worse, but I do not know for sure. After about an hour or so, members of both groups started dwindling, and we decided it was time to go. Proud Boys walked protesters to their cars in every direction so they would feel safe. At no time during the event did I see any physical violence, nor did I hear any threats of violence from either side except for those 2 I already mentioned. My question to the impeachment march is, if you were physically assaulted or threatened with violence, why did you not immediately make that known to the sheriffs? I saw no reports being made, and if that happened, do you have any photographic or video evidence of it? There were several videos posted online of the entire event, and I have watched them all. At no time in any of these videos did I see any of the pushing, shoving, or elbowing that these people are claiming occurred. I believe that the sheriffs did everything in their power to protect both groups and their First Amendment rights to assemble and protest. They tried to keep us separated, but for a while, the impeachers would not comply. By the end of the day, they had the event completely under control and both groups separated. On our way home, we actually had a discussion about how well the sheriff's office did, as opposed to the May 1st rally where I was arrested for a selfie stick that SDPD knew I had in my hand at the location hours before the event started, but that's a story for a different day. To the organizers of this march, if you do not want to counter-protest at your event, may I suggest a private event at a private venue with private security. The San Diego Sheriff's Department was there to protect all of our rights, not to man the door to keep out those who did not want to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends the public comments. I will make one statement. Upon completion, the investigation of CLERB case 17056 will be noticed on the agenda and presented to the board for review. If you have any additional evidence, please send it to the CLERB office, 555 West Beach, San Diego, Suite 505. Thank you.
Whatever you decide, we will not allow our civil rights to be violated by the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, we're going on to our agenda.